Thank you very much indeed, Sadhvi ji, and my warmest appreciation and gratitude to Pujya Swami Ji and to the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance and Parmarth Niketan for bringing together this incredible cast of stakeholders, advisors, mentors, and very, very critical colleagues and partners. In this context, it's not simply a protocol thing to thank you, but it is actually part of the conversation that I believe needs to be held and upheld, which is that you bring together in this kind of a setting and in the work that you do systematically as the Global Interfaith Wash Alliance, you actually bring together the various stakeholders, the secular communities that are working on shared issues, the governmental, the intergovernmental in the form of the UN in this case, but also multiple faith communities. And this is precisely the formula for success, not just of an initiative, but for survival and for thriving on this particular planet. If each community was to do its absolute best, if the United Nations was to achieve its absolute best, if the government was to achieve its absolute best, if the Catholics as a whole were to achieve their absolute best, if every one of these mass entities were to do their best, it would still not be sufficient. What makes a difference is that we can work together, is that these various constituents can come and work together. And this is precisely the magic formula that we have to, as all the other speakers have noted, faith-based and non-faith-based, multilateral, governmental, non-governmental, our task, the moral imperative that each one of us as individuals and institutions has is the imperative to work together. What COVID-19 has manifested is our collective vulnerability. No one is free and able to survive without the other. There's a collective vulnerability, therefore there is a quintessential interdependence between us as human beings. But COVID has, as others have mentioned on this particular day, what has to be upheld. Without our environment, we have no species to speak of, including ourselves. So therefore, there is a moral imperative to work together as institutions, as individuals, because we are part of the same planet, the loss of which would be the loss for all of us. It isn't a luxury, it isn't an afterthought, it's not something we're going to get to after we consider how we build our defense mechanisms and invest enormous amounts of money in our defense infrastructure. Actually, to save this planet and make it not just saved, but a thriving organism, in order to do so, we save ourselves as human beings. It's really quite as simple as that. It's not an option and it's not a luxury. It's an absolute imperative. And this has come out very clearly. What I have heard and learned from so many of you in the course of the last umpteen years is that we speak about the value and the strength of the faith communities. Indeed, compared to the realms of religion, the United Nations and all the other intergovernmental organizations in one place are a tiny speck. I repeat, compared to the realms of religion, religious institutions, religious leaders, religious communities, religious NGOs, compared to the realm, this universe of religion, the intergovernmental and the governmental entities are a drop, are a tiny little speck on the map of our universe. Therefore, the imperative is indeed this collaboration, which many of the UN actors and others have spoken to. I don't think we're at a stage where we need to justify collaboration, but we continue to be at the stage where we need to uphold and celebrate the incredible value of that collaboration. We saw and we heard, Audrey already upheld a living example of this, which is the collaboration around the interfaith rainforest. The rainforests are the lungs of our earth. COVID has shown us that when we can't breathe, we die as human beings. Not looking after our rainforest is not looking after the lungs of this earth. How do we expect to live? So therefore, it's not a luxury, it's not an option, it's an imperative that we work together. The Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, thanks to people like Charles and Fletcher and Audrey and Victor, is possible, has made remarkable developments because it has been quintessentially a partnership between so many different stakeholders and sectors. One lesson learned from the UN system and the UN's way of engaging is that, yes, in the United Nations system, there is now an understanding beyond doubt that engagement with faith actors is an absolute necessity and has very critical roles and contributions. However, we still need to impress upon the United Nations that the point that Charles just said, which is that we must work multi-faith, not only multi-faith, we must work, and this is already part of the UN Interagency Task Force guidelines for engaging with faith-based organizations, is that we must work multi-faith. We cannot work with only one religious community, no matter how massive, how impressive its size and its institutions. We must work multi-faith. The lesson number 2 that needs to be learned and enacted as per the example of many successful cases in the UN system is that we cannot silo the work of religion from the other work with other civil society stakeholders or political stakeholders. As we convene the religious, we must convene the various other stakeholders, which is again a best practice example upheld by the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative, which brings the multiple stakeholders around the table. That's why it's been able to make an impressive difference in the short time that it has existed. We work only with religious communities, it isn't enough. We work with all religious communities, it's fantastic, but still not enough. We work to strengthen civil society as a whole, we might just be getting there. We work with civil society in the private sector and the governments and the intergovernmental. That is humanity, that is the diversity, that is what humanity is, that particular diversity, and that's the magic formula again. From the faith-based and faith communities side, I've seen remarkable work. I've been touched by such remarkable work and words. We still have a moral obligation to work together better. We've seen from the COVID response that we tend to silo our areas of work. We're each running to try to uphold the organization that we represent. In truth, we still have some ways to go, and I think it's honorable to acknowledge the vulnerabilities as we celebrate the achievements. We still have some ways to go as people of faith working in faith organizations to work together diligently, simultaneously, deliberately. It costs a lot more time and energy. It costs more resources, but it is not an option. It is an absolute necessity. We must work together systematically for one another. If we do so, we will not need to call upon a specific area of engagement with the indigenous, because faith, the indigenous, is a community, is several communities of faith. If we were deliberate and diligent about working together, we would not need to make that call. We need to make that call because we're still siloed in our work in the faith communities. So it is important for us to take responsibility for the urgency of working diligently, systematically together at all times. There is no issue, there is absolutely no issue in our universe that is not dependent on one another. There is no reason whatsoever for us to work in our siloed organizational spaces. No matter how valuable and how intent and how noble our mission, there is no earthly reason not to work together as people of faith, as communities of faith. There is no earthly reason not to work together systematically with other civil society actors, with governments and intergovernmental organizations, with the private sector. There is no earthly reason not to work together. And that's the heart of the message that we need to learn now. We've heard from the science, we've heard from the governmental, we've heard the knowledge, and we've heard from the heart of all the religious leaders and the spiritual leaders who have spoken on this call. Please hear me. There is no earthly reason not to work together. It is hard work. But as the verse in the Quran that I quoted earlier says, "Inna ma'al usri yusra," with every hardship, there is an opening, there is grace, there is mercy. Mercy happens when there's hardship. So yes, let's embrace the hardship of this particular call to work together to save our common planet, because we will not exist without it. So let's work together to save this common planet, because in that hardship is grace, is mercy, is the ability to make the change that we need to ensure that this planet is not only surviving. It's not only about surviving, it is about ensuring, in Maya Angelou's words, that this is a thriving space. for all of the species that happen to live and breathe and give breath to one another. So I want to thank Jiwa. I want to uphold UNEP. I want to thank every single one of you on this call, because you are living, breathing examples of that attempt to be collaborative, but especially Sadhvi and Swamiji, because you have gone out of your way, and that is what is required. But you have gone out of your way to be inclusive of all. You have not prioritized one particular group or one particular community or one particular voice. And in that search and intentionality to be radically inclusive, you have exemplified precisely what we need to do together. So I bow to you in full deference to what you are each doing, and I thank you greatly for the privilege of being able to listen to you all today. Blessings.